Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Good. I hope you had a fantastic couple of days here at DIAS, and I hope you learned a lot about what Databricks has to offer. But more importantly, I hope you got a chance to network with your peers, some of the brightest minds in data and AI. We are super excited to talk about our own journey, internal journey with Databricks on Databricks, how we leverage Databricks internally to drive business transformation across the enterprise. So I'm Deepa Gopinath. I'm the Senior Vice President and Deputy CIO here at Databricks. And this is my partner in crime, Romit, Jadhwani, who heads up data and analytics. Traditional standard safe harbor statement. So a little bit about my team. The IT at Databricks team, very lean team, about 130 employees out of a total of 7,000, so fairly small team. And we've modeled the IT organization with a product mindset. So we've modeled it very similar to an engineering R&D org in the sense that we have IT product managers who build very close partnerships with each of the business functions across HR, finance, marketing, sales, customer support, and product eng, and drive business capabilities and a roadmap for IT delivery against those business objectives. And this is a pretty important shift for us where because of the culture we have at Databricks, where data is front and center and it powers decision making for every business function, we have required data literacy in every IT role. And what I mean by this is even the product managers, the engineers, the software engineers, the Salesforce engineers, we require data literacy in the roles, and we make sure that's part of the hiring process as well as we go through building out this team. And part of the charter that we have in IT is this customer zero focus, which is what we are here to talk to you about, where we truly believe that we want to be the first and best customer, showcase Databricks in the best way possible, by providing that value to you all, our customers. And we, as part of our journey implementing Databricks internally, we iterate with our product team. We provide the feedback on what features are working, what are the product gaps, and as they act on those gaps, we build that capability back into the internal use cases. And last but not the least, the main goal of any IT organization is to provide value to the business. So value to Databricks and how we solve all the use cases across those business functions, HR, finance, sales, marketing, and so on, is front and center for what we do. What is top of mind for every IT leader? It's no different for us. How do you drive efficiency and productivity across the enterprise? How do you bring your costs down? But we try to do that by not compromising on the user experience. So we keep our employee experience front and center. So if I'm trying to build a capability for the sales organization, I try to make sure that the seller, I'm driving productivity and simplifying their day-to-day job in the best way possible. We do that where governance and security and privacy are table stakes. It cannot be an afterthought. So that's part of our overall approach to anything we do in IT. And the data-driven culture I spoke about earlier, that is the underpinning of how we operate the organization. I won't drain this because you've heard a lot about this in the past couple of days, but the data foundation and the data intelligence we have in our lakehouse is super critical for driving the business value and insights to each of those business functions. And that, coupled with generative AI capabilities, is what truly makes the data products that we deliver to the business. And we'll walk you through a handful of case studies where we've put this in action, put this to reality, and we've learned a lot of lessons. It's not all been a rosy story. So we'll share some of those challenges, lessons learned, and hopefully you all get some insights from that. So this is what our ecosystem looks like internally. On the far left, you see the traditional set of SaaS applications that exists in almost every enterprise. NetSuite we use as our ERP, Salesforce for our CRM, Exactly is our commissions tool, Workday for HRIS, and so on. We use a combination of Fivetran, where applicable, and custom PySpark to ingest the data from these sources, but we're actively moving into Lakeflow, which you just heard the announcement on. In the Lakehouse, which we call Central Log Food, just to give you an idea of the scale at which we operate, it's 2,000 plus active users, tens of petabytes of data sitting there, because it's a single lakehouse that houses both product telemetry as well as business data. So it's not a delineation where your business data warehouse is separate from your product data. All the data science use cases are also running off of this central infrastructure. And we follow the medallion architecture paradigm. So this data goes into the raw data, goes into the bronze tables. We transform that. We have DQ frameworks in place. And a lot of our effort in IT has been in building the single source of truth, the gold schema, the gold tables, which is the validated, verified data set, which is high quality. And that is what feeds the tables and the BI layer that you see on the far right. Now, one point I want to call out is you see the arrows into the enterprise systems. So I mentioned earlier that we did not want to compromise on our user experience. So we want to meet the personas where they are. So if I'm a seller, I tend to be in Salesforce. I want to expose the insights, the data insights in the tool where they are. So we have reverse ETL built in where we enable a lot of those key insights back into the tools where these users are. In the bottom, we use our model serving, feature serving capabilities. We have a case study we'll talk to you about where we are augmenting this whole lake house using generative AI. And we just haven't slapped ChatGPT onto a chatbot. And that's not the approach. We tried that approach and failed. And we've taken several use cases which are in pilot as well as in production now, which we'll talk to you about. And all of this built on the foundation of Unity Catalog. So the governance piece is super critical, as you all know. So with that, let me hand over to Romit, where he'll cover a couple of case studies on how we've gone through this journey.
Cool. Thank you, Deepa. In the next few slides, you will see 4 case studies and how we have used Databricks and Databricks to really drive business efficiency. So before I introduce the first one, let's do a quick poll. So raise your hand if the relationship with you and your business team can be improved. Raise your hand if you think your business team comes to you for mostly transactional items. Raise your hand if you think you come a little late into the game. A lot of the thinking has already been done. So if this resonates with you, hopefully the first case study will inspire you. So here, the first one is about really how do you take a business organization to make it more a metric-driven organization. And here we'll talk about what we did with the HR team. A top people priority is to foster a world-class high-performance culture. So when our chief people officer came to us with this objective, this was quite ambitious, and it's quite ambiguous as well. So we engaged in a dialogue with them, really asking these questions. Is how are we going to make this happen, right? How do we take something that ambitious and really convert this into actions that, in this case, your VPs or your management or leaders will take? How do you build experiences to capture these actions? How do you go about measuring that we're actually making progress towards this objective? And finally, how do we track and report? And the reason why I said these questions are important to ask upfront is because, again, you don't want to be in a situation where your business team is coming to you is like, Just bring the data into bronze and we'll figure it out, right? So how do you change that direction? So one of the first things we did when we were thinking through this is we need to come up with an HR metric strategy. And here the main focus was how do we take that objective, which is foster the world-class high-performance culture, and deconstruct it into levers, tactics, into experiences that can be built around these levers and tactics, and finally, what are the data artifacts? And this could be your medallion architecture, your goal tables, dashboards, whatever you have. Once we went through this end-to-end, we can start working on the build-out. And some of the key questions here was, how do we think about ingestion? Again, we're talking about multiple systems out here. It's HR data, could be across your HRS, could be across your ATS systems. How do we bring all of that in? How do we think about transforming them from bronze to gold? And of course, really focusing on the single source of truth that Deepa spoke about. So we have few artifacts that can really drive value across the entire organization. And again, this is HR data, so by default, it is sensitive. So what is our governance stance out there? What are some of the policies we need to apply out here? What are some of the roles, and how do these roles separate with this separation of duty across an analyst, engineer, or an admin? And finally, how do we set up as different environments, whether it's dev, stage, or prod, by applying these policies across all these personas? We'll talk about all of this. Now, one framework that really helped us was this framework called the metric tree framework, which is heavily used in growth analytics. And this measurement framework really helps you objectively break down this problem space, and in this case, our objective, into what are the outputs you really care about, and finally, into the levers that as a business, team, or combined you can activate, and finally, down to the tactics that you can deploy. Now, we spent a lot of time to build this out with the HR team. It was back and forth, multiple workshops. And the reason why that's really important is, as a concept, you want to make sure metric tree is understood by the business. So that's first. And the second most important thing you want to focus on is the final deliverable needs to be as close to the representation of how they are thinking about how this will play out. So all the thinking around the levers and the initiatives they're going to run, what are some of the things they need to build with respect to tactics? Because once you have this metric tree, it becomes your blueprint for the build-out. Now, we spoke about medallion architecture, so a quick introduction. This is a design framework used by Databricks. And the primary focus out here is logically organize your data in the lakehouse with the goal of incrementally and progressively improving the quality of it as it goes through all these different layers. So as Deepa said, bronze is where it's raw ingestion. We use a series of connectors as well as multiple systems. So Workday is our HRIS system. We have Greenhouse as ATS. We have Anaplan for all headcount planning data. We have a custom performance tool which we do our performance management on. And you don't see this out here, but we have Culture Amp for all our sort of employee surveys. Now, as I said, we use custom, in this case, JDBC connectors as a Fivetran, and we are looking into how we move all of this into Lakeflow. Once this data is in bronze, you start transforming it. This is where all the business logic comes in. Our thinking around silver is these are canonical entities. So for HR, this would mean you have a table which is your employee master, think of a candidate master, requisition, interviews. So all the entities that are logical in your HR space can start applying here. And finally, gold, as we have heard, these are the consumable data marts. And here we went back to the metric tree and we looked at the levers as well as tactics. And for each of those, we started building these gold tables. So we had something for recruiting, something for engagement, how do you think about rewards, how do you think about retention? Now, when you look at the data products, in this case, our data product really was the AI BI dashboard that we had to build. And for these following personas. So for the manager persona, these are the people who are actually going and managing their team. What they really care about is whether they're getting all the operational insights. What's the recruiting velocity? What's their offer accept rate? These are the things any manager would keep asking, where you potentially might not get it right from these systems. And a lot of this is because you're combining data from multiple sources. For your VP+, so these are folks who are managing the organization, they want to know, are we making the right investments? Are we actually moving towards that high performance culture? You have your exec team, which is really looking across the entire company with the same objective, that are we really heading towards that objective at the time frame they are looking at? And finally, the core team that is understanding, are these tactics being effective? do we have the right set of levers and all? Another data product we were thinking of is in the performance management tool, where again, any manager that does performance management might need a lot of data points to make the decisions on calibrations, promo nominations, compensation planning. So bringing data in there as well. So let's talk about governance, because all of this is highly sensitive data. So here you have your personas. You have your typical users. In this case, would be your VP plus managers. You have certain users that need special access. So these are your HR BPs that might need access to much broader scope than your VPs. You have your admins, and then you have your engineers. Our general philosophy around governance is to ensure all these personas are productive with the right level of separation of authority. So with that, we apply this across all our environments, across all our policies, across all the data. So in the production setup, if you look at your users, we really want to make sure they have access to their slice of the organization. So there we use Unity Catalog and use the role level security to make sure VP can look at all the data they need for their organization. In this case, our HR BPs that are special access users get access to every data because they need to understand across the entire organization. Our admins, similar to our special access, have access to all the catalog and workspaces. In case of engineers, we believe that engineers don't need to have access to really sensitive data. So the way we have set it up is, but they do need access to run operations. So they need to monitor the workflows. Something breaks, they need to jump on it. They need to add some clusters, whatever that is, right? So they need to be productive. So they're in production right now. We have all credentials in the Databricks secret store, right? And that's access controlled by service principals. Also, all jobs run under this service principle, and none of the engineers can access it. So with that, an engineer is productive. They can do all the monitoring they need. They can make sure the data operations run as intended, but they don't need access to any data. In our dev setup, it's different, where they do need access to data. They need to build these pipelines, so they need to understand, but only the shape of the data. So where possible, we have representative or synthetic fake data. And if that's not the case, we actually have gone and tagged all the sensitive fields, and that's where we have worked with the data platform team to do that. And this happens right at the ingestion. So once this data gets tagged, all this data, then we have apply column mask, something that we spoke about at the keynote this morning, and that's applied to all the data that's sitting in a dev environment. And then in staging, it's really a mix of your dev and prod. So we have the same data stance as your production, but as the same compute stance as your data stance as your dev, and the same compute stance as what's then production. So let's recap. The first one is really starting from the top. If you're coming in, if you're having a good productive relationship with your business partner, really think about what objectives that they care about, and start thinking about how do you build that metric or measurement strategy end to end. We shared the metric tree as a concept that would be helpful to help them structurally think through start to finish. Another key point that we learned was understand who the end users are. Luckily, we have a product management organization where we brought these PMs in, and they were the ones that went and engaged with the users, did a lot of user research, a lot of interviews to understand how they would engage with this data. And that would really help us craft what the experiences look like. And finally, we spoke about the importance of governance. And the good thing is Databricks as a product gives you a lot of out-of-box features where you can really start applying governance from your schemas all the way down to your workflows and even fields. So for the second case study, let's go beyond just data, right? So here you have your data sitting in the lakehouse. Most teams, what they do is, they open it up. There's a lot of reporting that runs on it, right? So it's almost reporting the news. But how can you move into a more proactive stance? And here the motivation was productivity of a sales team. Because we noticed our sales, again, going back to the interviews we did, we found that our sellers are spending too much time. They're going through multiple dashboards. They're looking at multiple tools. They're going back and forth with your business analysts on questions and Q&A, right? So that's not, if a seller is doing all this, when do they have the time to do the actual selling? So how do we change the direction of this? How do we go from this reactive pull model that sellers have to do into a proactive push model? And the good thing is we have all the data in the lakehouse. Let's look at one use case. So we have customer account onboarding, and this can apply to any use case, right? So here you have a customer creates a new workspace. Again, we have product telemetry, so all the data comes into our lakehouse, so we understand what the setup, what happened when. And there you could have one simple rule that's going on is like, if a new workspace is set up, and after certain days, it's not really meeting our best practices, the standards that we want a workspace to abide by, you can actually send an alert to your sales team. It's like, we see this new workspace set up, do you need help? Or does the customer need help onboarding? And if that's the case, a customer can say, yes, I do need that. A sales team say, yes, that'll be helpful. We can have an onboarding specialist work with your sales team and really work with the customer to get that all set up. Let's look under the hood. As I said, in the lakehouse, we have all the data. We have the telemetry data as well as Salesforce, all systems coming in. Now, using this data, we have built what we call these signal tables. So these are aligned to each of the entities. In this case, we have done it for your account, product, and team. What these signal tables are doing is giving you the most recent, most up-to-date state of that entity. Because once you have that, you can start bringing in your alerts. So alert is a set of specifications in our system. So an alert is a business logic. So back to our example there, an alert would look like, look for a customer that created a workspace in the past 7 days that hasn't met these standards. And as soon as that happens, you bring in a frequency. Let's make sure it runs anytime a state changes. You add the persona, like who should get this alert, and finally, what channels you want this alert to get distributed. For our example, we chose to go through Salesforce as a distributing mechanism to all our solution architects and our account executives. Now, there are 2 loops that need to happen, 2 feedback loops. The first one is what we call alert tuning. So for an alert that is out there, if someone acts on it, right, we need to know. If someone mutes it, we need to know. Someone ignores it, we need to know. Someone opens it, whatever they do, we need to know what happened with the alert, right? And the second, more important, which you don't see out here, is really focusing on if something happens downstream within the account because of an alert, we need to capture that if it's not coming through product telemetry. The second outer loop helps you really understand the efficacy of your alerts, whether they're actually working or not. So here is an example. On the left, you see sort of the message boarding getting built for, in this case, our favorite paper company, Dunder Mifflin. So there's an alert that fires. It shows up in Salesforce. And not only in that object that you see, we explain why the alert is coming in. We also give them a set of recommendations. But not only that, we also have call to action. So right there in Salesforce, the seller can say, yes, approve, I think this is valid, we need help. And our onboarding specialist will reach out to your sales team. So let's recap this. The main focus here, you're changing behaviors. You're going from a reactive stance to a proactive stance. So the first thing we want to do is you want to start small. Run a bunch of pilots. Here we were lucky to partner up with a team that was actually thinking about this. So we really got in with them, think through what are some of the initial use cases that we need to do. We worked with them really closely to craft these, and we ran multiple pilots. Second thing is really thinking with any alerting product. This is a thing you need to focus on. How do you tune that signal to noise ratio? Because if your alert is not getting actioned on, your users, and if there's a lot of noise, your users are going to start completely going blind to your alerts, rendering the entire exercise completely useless. And this is your number one risk. Finally, we spoke about how do you close the loop, so that way you don't have a bunch of alerts that are firing and no one is actually looking at them or even actually getting value from them. So being very focused on how do you close that loop so you can keep making sure you have the right alerts firing. And one of the early pilots, what we did, we actually had a human go and review all these alerts. So they would literally be the sort of the gatekeeper saying, yep, this looks good, let them go. Now, that's fine because they are really the ones that are checking for quality. But that shouldn't be an end state, because all you're doing is you're taking one manual process from one place and pushing it to somewhere else, right? So you're really onboarding down the manual debt. So this is where really focusing on how do you think through the quality, how do you encode it into your alerting mechanism. That way you have high alerts going all the time without any human judgment. I'm going to hand it back to Deepa, who's going to talk about our GenAI products.
All right. How many of you have been asked, what is your AI strategy? Can you build a chatbot? I'm sure each one of you have been asked by your business, how can you inject Gen AI into everything that you do to drive efficiency? So what we'll talk about here is our journey. And we call these sidekicks. It's internal branding that we've done for the capability. It's very similar to, it's a conversational chat bot that we have enabled using Gen AI. So what we started off with was to set a clear vision and direction before we started executing on these Gen AI pilots. And the vision was very much with the mindset of that customer first focus. We wanted to have that focus, use our own technology, eat our own dog food, drink our own champagne, whatever analogy works, but do that with the goal of driving productivity for Databricks. And the strategy that we used was to implement AI governance first and foremost. So we worked closely with our legal team, privacy team, security team. All the pilots that we did, we made sure we had close partnership to ensure we were doing it in a secure manner. This, for any IT organization, there's always this debate between buy versus build. So we have a hybrid approach where we do buy SaaS solutions off the market, turnkey Gen AI solutions, and we only choose to build where appropriate. So where there is a gap in the market, that is where IT tries to build solutions. So we adopted that hybrid approach. And then this is the key point. We had a joint business IT partnership where to enable this experimentation, this is really critical for any Gen AI pilot. To enable this experimentation, we had a business and IT combined hackathon. Typically, you have an engineering hackathon or an IT hackathon, but we brought the business along where they gave us the ideas, the use cases that they would like to see leverage Gen AI, and then we had engineers who partnered with them to build those capabilities, and those ended up becoming pilots, and then those were the early footholds, and those individuals ended up becoming ambassadors as we drove adoption into production. So those are the tenets of our strategy. Now, how did we do this? We started off like many of you. We started with the traditional RAG approach. Quickly realized that that alone does not suffice. We need a combination of prompt engineering, RAG, as well as fine-tuning. I'll talk about specific use cases where we went down this journey. And now we are actually piloting an agent tool chaining model as well, because we have some use cases that needed that capability. Spoke about the importance of those early footholds and that experimentation, that A/B testing. We started that in the customer support space. We ingested all the knowledge base articles and used a traditional RAG application chatbot to drive efficiency there. I'll talk a little more about that. Another use case we tried was in the learning space, in the learning and enablement space. We called it brick nuggets, but it's micro-learning, small bite-sized learning content that we were able to surface to our sellers about product content, competitive collateral, and so on. And the chatbot just wouldn't retrieve it, but it would also quiz the consumer to test their understanding of the learning content. And then in the finance and legal space, we had some experiments both on the buy as well as on the build side, specifically around contract summarization, contract data extraction, and so on. A little more detail on the RAG support bot. So as I said, it consumes the entire knowledge base. We vectorize it using our own Databricks vector search. And it's the interface that our end users use is through the support portal as well as our Slack. application, and you can see the adoption metrics. So it's actually one of the examples which we have taken into production, and it's active in over 40 engineering channels and over 3,000 active users. So it's really driving a lot of value in bringing content that would have been difficult for people to retrieve and summarize. This is another example where we found the boundaries of RAG to be limiting. So this is a content generation use case, specifically in sales. An XDR is a business development rep or a sales development rep. Traditional outbound prospecting that they tend to do is sending blast emails to prospects to get their attention. What we did, this is where we brought data intelligence that is in our lakehouse to be able to drive that targeted email. So you'll see on the right here, we recognize that John is a CIO, and the messaging has to be based on the role of the person. Whereas if John was a data engineer or a data practitioner, the messaging would have been different. We know that John is from Acme Bank, and Acme Bank is in the financial industry. So we have a customer reference from another customer, Capital One Finance. So we're able to draw that intelligence that is in our lakehouse and use that to deliver a much more targeted prospecting email with a call to action. So with this is also in production, and we are able to see that it is providing exactly comparable results to having a human do this. So you have a completely AI-driven approach to outbound prospecting now with similar response rates and similar open rates that a human would do. This is another example of what we're doing for our sellers. I spoke a lot about user experience and field productivity. So we are developing this field sidekick, which again brings the power of the data intelligence in our central log food, our lake house. And so these are some examples. So I'm a seller. I'm trying to prepare for a meeting with the customer. I can get a summarization of all the previous meetings I've had with that customer, any blockers, any next steps, action items that I need to follow up on. So I can prep for my meeting much more effectively. I can surface competitive collateral. So if I'm in a snowflake takeout situation, I can surface that competitive collateral to the seller. And they can engage in a conversational interface with the bot to get access to much more specific information about the customer and their competitive data landscape. We also help with use case identification. So in that previous example, if Capital One had a successful use case with Databricks that this seller needs to reference for another customer in the financial sector, we can surface that through this. So these are all examples of how we use GenAI to drive that productivity and efficiency for the enterprise. Now, how does this actually work behind the scenes? It's a lot of what you heard in the keynotes earlier, as well as in sessions you've probably been. So the content, the unstructured content, is ingested into our lakehouse, into the vector search. Below you have the retrieval and augmentation happening through the traditional RAG chain, using feature serving, model serving, as well as ML flow. And we surface this data through Slack as well as in Salesforce. So we are able to now, we're building a Chrome plugin where it follows the user wherever they are in Salesforce, and the seller can conversationally interact with the chatbot. We're now also pivoting to a tool chaining model where you can combine these various tools and get more reasoning power into the GenAI capabilities that I just spoke about. So to conclude, these are the lessons we learned. I am sure this will resonate. Data is messy. If you do not focus on your single source of truth, the foundation that I spoke about initially, augmenting AI on top of that is not going to give you the benefit to the value that you're looking for. So we do need to do that hard work of building that SSOT. Respect MLOps. What we found is, it's not as simple as your prompt engineering literally has to follow the versioning, the CI/CD deployment paradigms that you traditionally follow for any software application. So you do need to follow the same rigor for a GenAI app as you would a normal full stack application. And then this one, good prompts require skill, because it's really critical that the prompt engineering is done by subject matter experts. So in our scenarios, the people who best understood that content and how to instruct the LLM model were the actual end users. So in that prospecting example, we had a handful of pilot end users, salespeople, who helped us craft that email to make it the best quality and instruct the LLM model to generate it with the best quality. And the last piece that I didn't touch on was fine-tuning. So we used the Azure OpenAI GPT-4 initially, just like most customers do. But what we found that we could fine-tune a Llama 70B model and get similar results at 1/70th the cost. So we were able to see a single email generation using GPT-4 cost us about 7 cents, but with a fine-tuned Llama 70B model, we were able to get it to 0.15 cents. So it was pretty powerful to see the same quality, the same responsiveness and performance that you get with a much smaller model. So that's in a nutshell. Let me hand it back. Oh, sorry, there's one more slide here. So looking ahead, we see potential for GenAI in every aspect of our business. If you look at business operations, we have a huge objective to get touchless order processing. And in order to achieve that objective, we need all these non-standard contracts. We need structured data to be extracted from these non-standard contracts so our revenue ops team doesn't have to touch every single deal. So that's an area we're doubling down on. I already spoke about the enablement and the field productivity use case. Marketing is another example. We're starting the journey with them, where we are using GenAI for content creation as well. So that, I spoke about legal. And then the last one is business analytics. Here, you've already heard a lot about Genie. Romit here is now going to walk you through an actual real-world example where we use Genie Spaces and how it's delivering value for our finance analyst organization.
Thank you, Deepa. So let's go to the last use case here. So we'll rush through this because I know you want to see the demo. So the setup here is well known. Organizations grow, they want a lot of data, they want it fast, and there are two big blockers to it. Dashboards, they're great, limited. It needs to be handcrafted. Any change you need to make is going to be expensive. Most companies don't have any governance around dashboard. It's free for all. Really difficult to discover the right dashboard you need. And then you need to move some data back and forth. That costs some money. You need to get licenses. Of course, that will cost some money. Now, if you're brave enough to have go and do ad hoc, that itself is frustrating. Again, business needs a lot of questions, need it fast. If you have analysts, they're usually stretched. Or if you don't have analysts, you're asking analysts to come and help you. Most likely, you'll be waiting forever to get prioritized. And most products don't give you the self-serve. Again, we spoke about this at our keynote. AI, BI, dashboards, and Genie really sets the stage for the next gen analytics. So you've seen the dashboards, it's all built on your lakehouse, and it's highly performant. And then Genie gives you that perfect exploration companion experience. So for us, what we did was we took the Genie product when it was released to us and really focused them on our level 0 metrics. So most important metrics. The one that we really care about is rated usage, which is the dollar equivalent of DBU or the consumption unit we have. So let's look at how this plays around. I'll try to do it here. I might be, okay, let's play this. I'm not going to say anything. So as you can see, we asked the first question on consumption revenue by here. It goes back to the lakehouse and gives you all the answers. Next, I'm going to check, what are the customers. I want to double click into it. It converts that English into SQL, gets you all the answers back. Now I want to pivot to look at something else. Let's look at what the products are for last year. And all of this running is, again, all the hard work you have already done. If you have these golden schemas, golden tables ready, all you have to do is just point it. At the keynote, what you saw was the experience, which was from a Genie dashboard. From a dashboard, how do you build Genie? Now this is directly going into Genie. Now this visualization use case, you can work with the visualization, you can turn it around. And another thing, like this one, break it down by BU. How does Genie know what BU actually means? So this is where you do your prompt engineering. So here we have built instructions. As you can see on the left tab, there's a whole console for instructions where you are hard coding what do you mean by BU. So it has that understanding to really understand when you say BU, what does it replace with all the dimensions. Okay. So let's look at what we actually learned, which will actually give you a way of making this happen in your organization.
You need to move fast. It's time.
Yes, time. Yeah. So I'll just go through this, but high level, get your users engaged. Or we spoke about the power users. They are the ones who will actually help you understand this jargon and then test it. We spoke about the right scope. If it's too large, it's going to hallucinate. If it's too small, you're not going to get the adoption. We spoke about really getting the users in and get them faster. So when you're 80% there, get them in so they can test it out. We spoke about governance being the most important thing. It's built on UC, so you don't really have to worry about it. And finally, we had a PM actually monitor this on a daily basis. The product gives you monitoring, so anyone gives a thumbs down on a response, the person who's monitoring it knows that. So you can go back, understand what's happening, look at the logs, and maybe even add an instruction or prompt that will help you. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.